Hello, everyone. Welcome to the destruction of Black civilization, great issues of a race from 4500 BC to 2000 AD, Chapter 3, Egypt, the Rise and Fall, segment, the third period of great rulers. So, welcome, everyone. I would like to start with not necessarily summaries, just something that you want to share. I'll start by saying that I had no idea the level of rulership and the knowledge of the dynasties that were held in Africa. I had no idea that that knowledge was out there. I thought it was just, basically information that was theory based and no actual proof of these rulers, but it seems like there's a ton of proof that these people existed and were doing constructive things of constructive value. Yeah, I was pretty blown away by that. It's a very powerful segment. I think both of them were. And yeah, I'll let whoever wants to go.
I really like learning about the great rulers, hearing the names of Amus, Nefertiti, Amenhotep, Thutmose, and Queen Hatshepsut, and Amenhotep the Third, Akhenaten. It was just really refreshing to hear these names because I've only heard these names and very, very, very rarely, and the names given context. These are real people who cared about Black people and who did their best to preserve the Black race. And it was also very tragic seeing the multiple times Black people have fought to take back Egypt, take back parts of Egypt, only for more white supremacists to keep coming in and taking it back. And it just we learned in this portion of the book that this was this time span we're covering, this which is I believe from 730 to 656. This is a time span upon which is also the 25th dynasty. This is the time span upon which Black people lost their land, called Egypt forever, to the Assyrians. I don't want to misspoke, but just lost their land to white supremacists, I would say. Very epic and tragic.
When I read this, one of the things that stood out was the names and literally struggling the entire time. I don't know. I have this thing, I'm gonna be completely honest, is like when it comes to like history, I have this like turn off thing in my brain that happens every single time. And I'm like trying to literally force through it when I read this book, especially this section. I think it was just because there's a lot of different names, and I'm like, who did what? Who was who? Who's the son of who? It's just like, it's kind of similar. I'm not gonna bring that up, but it's just very similar to like other things I have read, and it's just like, oh, it's the son of blah blah blah, and then that's the son of whatever, and it just kind of gets to the point where I'm just like, okay, I'm confused the entire time. But yeah, so I'm not gonna lie, that section or this section of rulers, and it was like the fact that it was another period of great rulers, and it was like this continuum thing that's happening within the book of hey, this is the rulers of this time, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. So I thought that was very interesting. And also, like, one of the things that stood out too is like through all these rulers, somehow the white people still get them. White people still come in and say, hey, we're the great now. And I think like even going into like the Ethiopia section where it says recapture Egypt, and it's just like, although they recaptured it, if you continue reading, it's like it just keeps going back to the whites, So I think that stood out the most is just like seeing these great leaders, and now I'm able to now I'm going to go back and cross-reference and see like, okay, this is how this person led. What did they do? And then go to this person. What did they do? What they do? And then continue just to see like, what did all of these leaders do, and how how did it like weaken the region, or how did it benefit the region or whatever, just to see like where the gaps were. And I know in some points of this book, it tells us some of the gaps, and then it also tells us some of the greatness within each leader, which I thought that would be helpful too, as attempted counter racists, to see like what is it that is just like, for some reason, it just cannot stay strong, you know, like whether it's a leader or not a leader, it's like for some reason it cannot stay strong. And I think like coming into my own knowledge is seeing like, oh, for this day and age, when it comes to like Black leaders, they're like killed off or something happens to them or whatever. So it's like this continuous cycle of like, maybe there shouldn't be a leader, you know? And that's one thing we've been discussing too, is like, it shouldn't be a leader, it should just be a whole communal base. So I think, is that the piece that was lacking this entire time? Is like, they've been trying to focus on kings and queens and not focusing on the community or the region itself and the people. So just a few questions I've been just doggling in my head as I've been reading it.
That's like, that's very interesting. That would be very beautiful to explore all of those thoughts as we go along, actually, because some of those thoughts had crossed my mind as well. But I don't want to get into that part so much so now, but yeah, I have a lot to say about the way that leadership kept on interchanging. That I think that's a statement about 70 kings in 70 days that showed you the carnage. But let's just going back to this first subheading. I really enjoyed reading this because I learned about Hatshepsut. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I try. The first time I was introduced to this, the fact, because I had this book a couple of years ago, I only briefly remembered this. So what we're doing now is like really like a high imprint for me, but I do remember that image of Hatshepsut, and my mom was doing my hair, and I just thought, wow, a dark-skinned, beautiful Black woman who looks like she should be on money. And that was just amazing imagery for me. If I had seen that years before, I don't know what my mindset would have told me about myself or beauty standards, and actually then it made more of an imprint on me, because we didn't have this whole queer movement and like liberal expression of gender, non-binary expression. When I had read that she was wearing male clothes and was the greatest pharaoh and dressed like a king, but then also used her feminine charm, I thought about the balance of what it means to be a goddess, or to basically be in godhood and have the balance of the two. And it also reminded me of like, it was very beautiful to have, to read about great Black female leaders in a time which predates the vote for women. It predates the liberation of women rights. It predates all of this, and these were women leaders who were revolutionizing trade, and it was just so good to have that link and reconnection back, rather than having that only connection to the feminist movement of I don't know, having the right to vote or saying no. Do you see what I mean? There's so much more impactful history or herstory for us to dissect and embrace in ourselves while moving forward. So yeah.
Agreed. I really enjoyed the opening of the segment, and I really think a lot of people should be aware that Africans, they're human beings who've been classified as Black by the white supremacist Europeans. They were fighting very hard, a full-scale war against the Hebrews, and they were fighting for liberation. And this was during 1645 to 1567 BC. And this time period brought upon like a slew of like great, powerful kings and queens who became essentially immortal. And I just wanted to read some of the names from the book of the queens. And I'm just gonna read the sentence where their names are covered. And this is on page 106. And it says, this was the remarkable 18th dynasty, with a line of kings and queens who became immortal. Amos the first, Nefertari, Amenhotep II, Thutmose the first, Thutmose the second, Queen Hatshepsut the Great, Amenhotep the third, Akhenaten the Great Reformer, and Tutankhamun. It was called the New Empire, and so it was in fact. So these I know for a fact that myself and 0526 were not exposed to any of these rulers or any of these African dynasties until adulthood. And that just shows you the level of educational suppression that Black people are under. White people are very aware of who the kings and queens are. The monarchy is very much alive here in England. So it's really unfortunate that Black people are taught that their history begins with slavery, and it gets better when we get to play basketball. So any thoughts on that? Any comments on?
Yeah, I really like hearing just the names, really important. Just the power that exists in knowing these names. I thought it was really unfortunate to learn about I believe it was the person, the king who hated Hatshepsut and erased all of the literature and images of her. I didn't really get. I wish that was explored as to why that was done more. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Yes, well, 0256. I do know who you're talking about, and I think that person was jealous of the people who came before him. I do believe he was mixed race. I'm not sure, but I wish that didn't happen as well. And also, I wish there was more information onto what exactly led that to happen. But from what I got from my understanding, there was some form of jealousy. Yeah. So yeah. Continue.
I found a passage. Let me just read it.
I go for it.
From 109, and it says, consequently, when he finally became king, Thutmose III, at last, he himself did what Asians and Europeans were to do on a scale so grand that the history of ancient Egypt, as essentially Black history, was almost completely obliterated. He undertook to erase her name from all of the monuments and temples she had built, destroying all documents bearing her name and smashing all sculpture likeness, paintings, and indeed anything that might indicate that Hatshepsut ever lived. So I do believe if this dynasty was functioning as a united independent dynasty, that they would have not allowed this to happen, and they wouldn't have also been relying on leaders to protect them. You know, everyone should have been on code about the dangers of everyone not Black, and that would have been a lot. That would have done a lot to preserve these dynasties, I believe.
Yeah, just to add to that 05, I do agree with that as well. It's just like the idea of, well, first, one of the things I've read that I've read in the beginning of this chapter on 107, that there was like already, well, previously as well, that there's already a divide between like obviously the blacks, the half breeds, the Egyptians, the white Asians. So it's like there's already so much divide. But I think when the half breeds came into play, where they started to mix, is where it kind of got like almost confusing, because they had a choice of like, oh, you can play either black or white, like you can choose, you know. Obviously they're gonna go for which has the highest like standard or whatever, or not standard, like the highest place in society, if that makes sense. It's almost like human nature, you want to just like be in the end group. So I think like even when going through the great rollers here, it was just like when a half breed came into play, they turned on them, you know. It's like they turned them in. It's like, oh, I'm not black, psych, you know. And then all of a sudden they're doing all these things that are just like that jealousy that we mentioned earlier, is that jealousy comes into play, and they think they have a better way. But all what I read through this is that the leaders just wanted, well, some of them, especially the half breeds, those who are half breed, wanted to expand. That was their whole thing. Like, let me expand and spread the ways. And then the ones who are black were like, let me reclaim what is already ours. So I think it's just this tension in society already, or in their I don't know if I call it society, but you guys know what I mean, like society, regions, communities, whatever you want to call it. It's just like there's too much of a divide within themselves that they can't like almost like pick a side or like agree on something or respect each other, if that even, you know, if that you want to say that too.
Yeah, I completely I agree with that statement, and I agree with what everybody's been saying in terms of, it was jealousy that was the driving force for, I believe, Hatshepsut's son-in-law, Thutmose the third, because he had to wait so long to rule. And that just reminds me of like how the ego gets in the way of the bigger picture, and how even though the European ego is the most fragile thing today, they put their ego aside in the long-term understanding of this, they're doing this for their children's children. And with that mindset, Hatshepsut's contributions would not have been erased. And just to think about that was done by your own people is just it's just destructive. It shows you why we need to lift each other up now more today than anything, because when shit hits the fan and God forbid there's wars and they incite a race war and there's like people are destroyed left and right, we're not, all the minor problems are the things that stop us from uplifting our own people at this moment in time, or supporting our own people, will go out the window. And then we're all one. You're all under the shade tone, so you're not okay, and then you're going to be treated as such. And having that understanding always and constantly would make such a difference for us. But yeah, and what I really did like about the start of this chapter was the fact that they had talked about when the 18th dynasty had come back and had kicked out some of the Asian rulers. They had there was a resurgence. Let me just see if I can read it from the very early on from 107. Okay, as would be expected under Black rulers, Thebes was again reorganized under the 18th dynasty, and much of its ancient grandeur restored. Temple building in the grand style was resumed. The 18th, like some of the previous African dynasties, was well integrated with loyal Asians, it should be needless to say, countless thousands of Asians who were wholeheartedly devoted to the Blacks, just as they were thousands of Afro-Asians, Egyptians, as loyal to the Black race as any Black could possibly be. Therefore, when an overall picture is presented, such as in my discussion of attitudes of Asians, Afros, and Afro-Asians and Africans towards each other, one should keep the always big exemptions in mind. Okay, I'm gonna stop there because the main point that I really wanted to like draw focus to was the fact that whenever Black rulership is back in place, despite those minor ego discrepancies that do come along the way, what was united and what showed was that their love again for their history and culture and preserving it and rebuilding and restructuring Thebes. What I really liked about this chapter also is the fact that they had explored some of the ways in which it allowed us to like paint a really good picture of the institutions that they had and how it was one with where you would study is the same place you'd worship, and integrating those two really made me see how a lifestyle will be completely different. Yeah, I'll read it more into it, but I'll just stop there for now.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nebula, for reading that. I think it's really awesome to just expose the world to Black rulers and their names and the dynasties that they existed to. So reading that definitely was great. And this one of the greatest pharaohs that's quoted in this book was Queen Hatshepsut, and she was coined the greatest woman pharaoh of Black Egypt from the 18th dynasty. Before reading The Destruction of Black Civilization, has anyone ever heard of this person?
No.
Okay.
Prior to reading, the only name I had heard was Imhotep, I believe, from The Mummy, and Nefertiti from something else.
But I do believe Nefertiti and Nefertari are two different people.
So, well, then.
So yeah, I think that's.
And they've dragged the name Imhotep through the mud. Mummy Returns is just like a repeated name for like the scary monster. And we now refer to men as like Hotep niggas, as in to say that they're like fake conscious, and it's just dragging, disrespecting names that we should be holding with high reverence and not. We only have white supremacy to thank for that.
Right. So I wanted to like talk about a bit about what Black people were doing during the 18th dynasty, and primarily what Queen Hatshepsut, the daughter of Thutmose I, what she was trying to do for Africa. And this list goes on. I'm pretty sure it's way more that she was doing that's not listed in the book. But it reads, this is on page 109. It says, even before becoming legal ruler, therefore she was actively pushing the things dearest to the hearts of all great African leaders: the expansion of foreign trade, international diplomatic relations, perfection of national defenses, vast public building programs, securing the South and the North through either peace or war, and one of her pet projects, building a great navy for both commerce and war. Her success on most of these fronts made her one of the giants of the race. So if she is the giant of the Black race, then the Black race is failing profusely by not knowing about this queen. And white supremacy is doing a great job of hiding such knowledge. And that's why this book club exists. I don't know of any African nation that's doing either of these things at the moment. And I could be wrong, but it sounds like Queen Hatshepsut was doing what Europe has done and mastered, and now Europe is one of the leaders of the Western world. You know, we all speak English, so parallels can be drawn. You know, this was in the 18th dynasty. It seems like Black people were ruling the planet to some extent. They were in a really, really great shape. Now, with the help of Asians, with the help of mixed race people, those classified as Black, you know, are at the bottom of the barrel. And I can't leave out Latinx people, those who are classified as Spanish-speaking brown people. They also contribute to Black people being at the bottom of the ladder when it comes to the hierarchy of the races on planet Earth. But the main problem of this is white supremacy. I'm just articulating the hierarchy that's very, very relevant and real and present and visible and not visible, visual, however you want to say it.
One of the things that I found too, that was what was it? Oh, that Mize had mentioned previously is that the like throne that has been like passed down, like Queen Hashiput, if I said that correctly, passed the throne down. That's correct, right? She passed the throne down to her son. Yes.
Her son-in-law, her daughter.
Okay, perfect. Okay, that's okay. So now it's starting to make sense to me, because I think one of the things that stands out the most is like, as this like throne, you guys understand what I'm saying? Like this throne is being passed down generations. That doesn't mean that the generations you're passing it down has the same vision as you do, you know? So even though this queen had this vision, she was so great and she passed the reins down, it was more like, it kind of just went into the hands of like, oh, because you're next in line. And I see it in like today's society. It's almost like how the Europeans keep passing down their reins down to who their sons are, their daughters are, racist woman, racist man. They continue to keep doing this idea. And it goes down to like, you don't know what the next person's like thoughts are unless they're on code. And I always think like, oh, Europeans have a natural code, you know, stick to your own, no other, you know, kill everyone else. But in this book, it's kind of just like you pass the throne down, but there wasn't any code of like how to like continue on. You know, it was kind of just like, oh, well, since I'm in charge, I'm going to do this. I think this is a good idea. And then it weakens. So instead of like building on each other, it's almost like starting all over again. Whereas like Europeans today, like they keep building on each other. It's like, oh, thank you, John, for that bill that you passed, because now I'm going to make something else to help that bill and continue the efforts. But now, and it's just like, no, we're starting all over.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's an excellent point to bring up. I didn't notice that, but when you sharing that, I do see that there's no consistency with like power being maintained between the people. Like it's like yeah, they kind of start all over when they should all be working together to maintain their land or their dwelling. I'm reminded of George W. Bush and his father, who both were on code. They both invaded brown countries, you know, and they both profited greatly off of invading brown countries. So yes, totally correct that white people have a code and maintain being on code, whereas Black people have no code whatsoever, which is why so-called powerful kings and queens still fall to white people who are very, very smart and deceptive. And because we learned that whether they're infiltrating by living amongst them or by coming through force, they have tons of ways of utilizing their code to mistreat and dominate non-whites, whereas Black people don't have a code to defend themselves or preserve themselves. So definitely striking differences, tragically.
Very well said. Very well said. We definitely need to get on code if we wish to solve the problem of racism, white supremacy. Um, moving along. So there is a part where we are learning about how there was a person who had took the place of Queen Hatshepsut and kind of erased her from history. Does anyone know why that was done or have any thoughts on why that was done?
I liked Ray's explanation. Sorry, Nanaya's explanation. That pretty much summed it up. But I feel that the third very much was ego. Yeah, thank you, Kweku. Ego, jealousy, and also maybe just a form of inadequacy of whatever he does do, it would be overshadowed by the great things she does. So in the long term in history, if her name's not even called out, then his contributions are vast great. Or maybe he didn't agree with the choices that she had made, despite the fact that it was the betterment for the people. I think when dealing with, from what I've just heard, the description I've heard of Seth Shepsut, the description I've heard of her has made me I want to write about her. I want to see her visual imagery. Me and Trey were talking about all we need is the funding, and then this whole book deserves elevation and light shined on it for film, 100%. Hatshepsut sounds like such a powerful woman that if you are predecessing that and they're not your blood and you've married into it, and according to the information we have, they're Egyptian, so they're half and half. Of course, listening into that rhetoric, then underlying forms of jealousy or takeover, or maybe people in their ear, just how white supremacists have done it before, would encourage that, like, you should erase it from history, and then him seeing it as a good thought. We don't know where it came from, but it certainly was the devil, because this is a woman that would have literally reformed my whole mentality. She's my Tomb Raider. But yeah, I hope that answered the question. Yeah.
No, definitely. I just wanted to gather more information. I appreciate that. So reading this, it becomes more and more clear that it's really hard for Black people to make strides towards I don't know what toward, I guess, liberation, justice, peace. I don't know what it is. Hopefully it encompasses ending racism, white supremacy, and we've had alliances in the past, and they fail sometimes or work sometimes, but I think up to this date, I personally believe that alliances haven't really done much for Black people. There was a great opportunity for the Native Americans and Africans to I can't even say that was possible. They were right here on ships, and the natives were being shot by machine guns. So never mind. I wanted to read from page 1112. It's a bit ahead off, but I just want to read more about dynasties and how alliances were handled. So it says, our references to dynasties formed by alliances between two groups against a third could be misleading to those who fail to grasp what had been said about the changing ethnic character of the dynasties over many centuries. From the 5th and 6th dynasty on, we have pointed out Asian penetration through royal marriage route caused the succeeding dynasties, with a few exceptions, to become increasingly mixed. Often they were only predominantly black, half black, less than half black, or predominantly Asian or Egyptian, Afro-Asian. The founders of the 18th dynasty, like many similar instances, instances, illustrate the reality of the process. For it is well known that the famous Queen Nefertari was all black, while her equally great husband, Ahmose I, was mulatto Egyptian. So that the 18th, like the great 19th dynasty of Ramses, was predominantly black, not all black. On the other hand, the long periods of all white Asian and European dynasties were emphasized and had to be emphasized to set the record straight. So now we have an understanding of, okay, some of the dynasties were, all the people were black. I'm saying black in a context that they were probably deeply, highly melanated. And of course, there were also those who were mixed race. But now we go to Egypt, you see a lot of light-skinned, I guess they're Egyptians. You see a lot of light-skinned Egyptians who are mixed race, are mulattoes, or however they classify themselves. So, and also in the films, they're depicted as being white for the most part. There's tons of Hollywood films and television shows where Cleopatra is depicted as a white woman versus being Egyptian or black or mixed race. So this is like one of the ways white supremacy works. It infiltrates and then it washes out black. It attempts to erase it and take credit, just like the person who took the throne after Queen Hatshepsut. It attempts to erase. That is just he was a white supremacist agent, and he was definitely not trying to better the black race. He was more trying to better his image and being very individualistic, which is a behavior pattern learned and trained by the white racist suspects.
Yeah, just to add to that, sir, as we're putting in the chat or as we're speaking about earlier, it's like ego. So I think along with this new throne every time, or new person in power every time, and their ideas, it's like along with hey, we're all black, let's sit together, it's like ego gets in the way. And it's one of those things where if you let your ego in it, if you allow your ego to be in it, then it's already going to be destructive. Because it's most egos are just hey, look at me, and not hey, look at the community. Hey, let's drive the community. It's not focus community, it's only on self. And that's very a European thing. And I think it's important to distinguish too, even if someone has good intentions, a leader has a good intentions, oh, I'm gonna do this. But as soon as they get in position, it's they almost feel like a superhero. They're oh, I got all this power, I can do X, Y, and Z. I want to do this. But then you also have the snakes, hey, I'm gonna whisper in your ear if you just come over here, or if you just do this, it'll be good for you. So I think it's important to just to stress the idea of having a code and being on code, as Sir was mentioning. Also, is just having some sort of thing to go off of. Although we passed the reign, is what are you basing your things off of? What are you going off of? And it's just important to almost see it as a continuation of my efforts, not my as in me, but like continuation of the efforts before.
Very well said. Thanks for. I am ready to move on to the next segment. Is there anything else that want me to be shared?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important as about at the end of the section, and it goes into how like the European whites were able to dominate and what avenues they use. And it says that 114, as the white priesthoods became stronger and more widespread, they were not only able to secure control of Thebes, the most powerful stronghold of the blacks in Egypt, but of equal importance, they were then in a position to gain followers in the rebelling nomarchies and persuade dissident chiefs to acknowledge the overlordship of Asian kings in various parts of the country. In short, they took over Africa's gods as their own as a means of taking over Africa as their own. Deep level infiltration right there. Secret agents, all stemming from white supremacy. This is their code. Infiltration is part of their code. Manipulation is part of their code.
Yeah, I think that was a really powerful piece from the book. And Mary, you can go. You can go, please.
Where was I? Yeah, so that part, that swag that you had literally just read, that I believe that is one of the most important parts, because I look at institutions today, I look at all places of authority, and what they had realized is just to make sure that they're in those positions and they can filter and control who gets to just become gatekeepers. I think that was what the European white supremacists had learned best from that observational period of being a secret agent and learning about the environment and how how our people had thrived at such a civilization and way of learning and sharing with everybody. I believe that truly, I think they just truly just saw, okay, will be devoted. So it's almost like it's that thin line between love and hate. You love and admire the person so much, you learn as much as you can from them so you can take over them. It's like, it reminds me of like the European mentality of what we see in like modern day films of the student killing their master as a way of showing that they've now learned from their master, and like that's supposed to be an honorable thing. I think that's truly where that asili comes from, in where they had learned so much from the African civilization, killed the civilization to overtake and now call themselves the greatest civilization. Yeah, so I think that that's a very important stronghold to have. Not if people are infiltrating or you are teaching, have some things that remain sacred, so the level of infiltration or the preservation of history can be on the right side. I actually wanted to read from an earlier page while I'm still here. On page 111, it was such a beautiful spark in the mind to read and get the visual imagery of the type of civilization and priesthood that was able to arise as the stronghold of the civilization was studied. Okay, let me just read. As a custodian of the temples, the priests were promoting and making their own positions more powerful and secure by promoting the divine kingship idea. It meant that each king would try to outdo his predecessors in building more bigger and finer temples and colossal burial structures. The pyramids for the royal saints and the sons and daughters of Ammon, Horus, Set, etc., etc. The priests were in the most strategic positions to acquire great economic and political power for themselves quite naturally and without any particular efforts to do so. There were the first men of learning, scribes, historians, scientists, architects, physicians, artists, mathematicians, astrologers, and especially chemists. Many temples, therefore, were colleges as well as places of worship. The temples were also places through which flowed much of the national revenue. We could go on and on, indicating how and why priests became so politically powerful in Egyptian life, and that even a great king like Akhenaton could not overcome their opposition. It was too late for him to escape from the now traditional status of being divine. One must say it is the price a god has to pay for god makers. In reading that and understanding that through, it's like that concept of friendly competition, having to outdo your predecessor, but in the realms of outdoing them for like just like amplifying the culture. I don't know, maybe there's ego driven in that, and that was like a seed that built towards that, something that could cause jealousy in terms of having to outdo your predecessor. But initially, from what it looks like it created here was a thriving atmosphere in society, because what they were competing with were admirable and moralistic, like moral driven and culture preserving ideologies and mentalities. The kind of things that we are more competitive for today is like how many likes you get on Instagram, or getting to fame via the common day industry methods of sex sells. So rappers outdoing themselves saying they're the baddest B word, or they got the biggest this, or the sexiest this, or that kind of mentality, or the biggest gun. That kind of mentality there is like, just shows you get a group of people and you make them competitive, but the mentality that you drive can really produce, there's a difference in products that's being produced. And so the fragility of whom holds your values and moral grounding is very important to bear in mind and filter.
Fantastic. Just wanted to say, religion has been, it appears that religion has been a timeless weapon that's been used against the Black people. So always keep in mind that our ancestors in Africa thousands of years ago have been, hoodwinked by white people, allowing them to infiltrate the deepest levels of their religious practices to the point where they were leading it. Very snaky. Let's continue.
Sorry, I also like the statement that Swa had brought up about page 114 in terms of just the importance of holding on to that mentality of the fact that where's that line? They were then in a position to gain followers in rebelling no marches and persuade dissidents chiefs to acknowledge the overlordship of Asian kings. I felt like that was very important to understand, that in surrounding the Asians that had surrounded and had moved in friendly and not taken control of like migration or borders and stuff like that, over the time that played to their disadvantage, because as soon as there was a coup, all those people living around the borders okay, so if you have a majority in your country, like how let's say like how we are kept the minority in this country, if how we're kept a minority in this country, if policies and things want to change, and it's driven by the European class consensus of middle class, and they're the majority rule, that is gonna go in favor of them, no matter how many of us vote, because it's been kept to a particular number. And it seems as if we did not mind, as if Egypt and the surrounding Ethiopia and Sudan and Libya could not or did not mind for that enough, to the point that Libya today is completely Arabian. And yeah, they do not acknowledge the ancestral roots in history, which is why the use of the pyramids has long been destroyed, and it's just a tourist attraction. And the spiritual significance of all those buildings have literally been removed, and there's probably like Coca-Cola cans and just disrespect around the site that we would literally have ritualistic practices for entering. And it's really sad because, yeah, thinking now, I would not associate Libya, Algeria, Morocco, all the surrounding countries of Egypt. I would not consider them African anymore.
Definitely makes sense. Are you down to move to the next Oh, no problem. Okay, so yeah, let's move on to Ethiopia recaptures Egypt. I really loved this chapter. I thought it was very epic, but also tragic, of course, because we all know what happened at the end and what's happening to today. Does anyone want to share their thoughts and emotions associated with the second segment?
The only thought that I had reading this short segment here is, damn, it's like they recaptured, they tried it again. They were able to gain control over Egypt. What I believe, but the lower Egypt, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure if I believe it's lower Egypt. And it's just, it almost made me like, as I was reading it, I was like, oh yes, get it back. But then the other part of me is like, no, it's like you can't just retake something and then do the same ways again, because I'm pretty sure as we continue reading, it's gonna say, oh, okay, and then the whites came and took it all again, But it was nice to see like some parts in this book where it was like, although all these things are happening, it was this continuous fight, and it wasn't just like, oh, I just gave it away. It was or it just has been taken from us. It was more of like a continuous fight. It's like, hey, we want to reclaim, let's reclaim what is already ours, and then see what happens after that. But one of the things too, as I was reading this, I don't think there was a plan after. It was kind of just like, how are we gonna like get Egypt back? And then it talks about how the blacks like use all their efforts to like reclaim it, but it doesn't talk about like what the plan was like to continue having it, if that makes sense.
Oh, that certainly makes sense. I'm not sure if they even got to the point where they were able to think about what they were going to do next, because they were still trying to reclaim it from well, at this point it was the Assyrians, the Arabs, the Asians. It had been so many different people that they had to contest the land with. But I totally agree. So
I would describe this section as epically tragic.
Yep.
Because they take their land back multiple times. Tragic because they lose the land. And there's a tragic pattern I noticed is that whenever the black people are coming back to take the lands, the black people who are oppressed are like, oh yeah, we're being saved now. Yay, our true rulers are coming back to help us, when they should have been trying to formulate some kind of code to get out of their situation instead of waiting to be saved on. So that was my the pattern I noticed: black people waiting to be saved, waiting for leaders to come and save them, and it takes like the united independent route to solve these kind of problems, I believe. And yeah, so it's really tragic, really very epic, knowing that the will was there to take back the land, but the knowledge to maintain it and keep it protected from white people was not there.
I agreed. Tragically epic.
Hey everybody, sorry I was so late.
No worries, Ben. How are you?
This is Rich. Thanks for teaching me. I got to interject right here, though. I have highlighted because it's right in where what you're talking about on 114 at the top.
Perfect.
It's the second sentence. And they were wise enough. These are the white conquerors of the Asian whites, and they were wise enough to gain control of the African religion. So now, as the whites became priests and worshippers of the supreme god and lesser gods of the blacks in Egypt, the success of erasing every vestige of early African civilization was moving toward the absolute. So that just shows how powerful, like you all were saying, I just wanted to kind of reinforce what everybody was saying, how powerful taking control of, since they couldn't conquer it and establish and wipe it out and establish a new one, they took control of the already existing religion, giving them the power to virtually stamp out the pre-existing leaders.
Definitely, part of our history. That seems to be a a routine that happens to us.
But it's encouraging. It's encouraging to me because I'm looking at these dates. They go for hundreds of years. Some of these interims go for hundreds of years before they come back and take back what was rightfully theirs. And I think it's encouraging for us because we're coming together now after only a couple hundred years, what, 200 or 300 years. It doesn't seem fathomable that we are actually, through reading this, we're coming back. We're going to make the comeback, the big comeback, and get together and be back on top in what, about 100 years or something?
I really hope that happens.
I do hope that happens too. I'm not gonna lie, reading this segment, this part of the chapter, Ethiopia recaptures Egypt. It seemed the ending was not like good for me. It was great information, and like again, like I was saying about the previous chapter, these are stories that need to be retold. These are like folks. These are the kind of stories that we need to have like embedded into our mentality. We don't need to know about King Arthur or like, yeah, fair enough. That's the ideology that we were raised on, and we can pick some forms of parable, moralistic sense from that. But there's a deeper, more 360 holistic way of like spiritual depth that we can get from tapping into these stories, I believe. So these are great stories to explore, invest into, and immortalize into film, and give our contributions to civilization, cultural preservation in history. I didn't like the ending. I believe that was I think it was 730 to 556 BC was the last effort to try and retake Egypt. And it really hurt reading that line. There was something that felt very defeatist, but still very proud to have the information and knowledge. But you look at Egypt today and it doesn't reflect that so something that was even fought for, in a sense. It just seems like it belongs to Arabs. And it's majority French speaking, so it's just layers and layers of invasion and colonial impact that is just far removed the culture.
I don't know if any of you know of Anwar Sadat, who was black, ruler of Egypt back in the 80s, I believe. And he came up with the most successful formula to unite the Middle East and a peace. He had a peace deal in Palestine. He was the one, and they shot him. They had to get rid of him. They assassinated Anwar Sadat. That's something to kind of look into, kind of do.
How do you spell his name?
I'm sorry.
How do you spell his name?
Sadat, Sodot. Mm-hmm.
Does anyone remember the names of the final protectors? So never mind. I just want to share the War Council of the group of black males who were, final frontier, trying to reclaim their homeland, what was theirs. So their names were Nepata. The War Council was held at Nepata, and the names were Pianki, Shabaka, and the generals were planning for their third great war against Asian invaders and the reconquest of all of Egypt. They began the 25th dynasty and were the last of the all-black pharaohs to rule the United Empire from the Mediterranean to the highlands of Abyssinia. I can't find a segment that lists all their names. If someone had that, I wanted to share that and read it, that'd be great. But I don't want to waste any time scrolling through the book. I should have highlighted it. But I've really appreciated what Ben and Mary had said. I feel like you kind of sped through the second half of it. Is there anything else that needs to be that wants to be shared? Anyone want to share some more knowledge?
Some more of their names that perfectly reflect what you're explaining about what they did. It's on page 117. Start from here. Taraka promptly marched up from the south again and massacred all of the Assyrian garrisons. Esarhaddon died leading a second expedition of vengeance in 699 BC. His son, Ashurbanipal, assumed the leadership, invaded Egypt, and put Taraka to flight. The Egyptian governors were reinstated under the governor general named Necho, or Neko, also Egyptian. As was to be expected, the blacks of Upper Egypt remained loyal to the African line. They shouted loud enough for posterity to hear that the blacks were the rightful rulers of Egypt. Taraka was successful by his nephew Tanutamon. He renewed the war against the Syrians and the Egyptians, the latter preferring as usual to support the Asian against native Africans. Tanutamon recaptured Memphis again, during which battle the Ethiopian governor general Necho was slain. This placed the Africans in a dominant position in North Egypt once again, but in 661 BC, the outraged Ashurbanipal drove the African armed forces out of the northern Egypt. He pursued them up the Nile and burned the ancient city of Thebes, the stronghold of Black power from times immemorial. Reading that and hearing Thebes being burnt down and destroyed, and understanding it was a place of education, learning, and worship through the reverences of sciences and that it hurt my feelings. It just felt like they had burnt down my university. Yeah, that really hurt to understand and read that, because my only growing up understanding of Thebes was a place in Greece, and no connection to Africa whatsoever, no connection to that richness of cultural heritage. And I loved Greek mythology, so Thebes was something that word stuck out to me, but and I guess on a soul level, sticking out to me for a different reason. Yeah, also what the names Taraka, what's the other name? Tanutamon. They sound like warrior names. Shabaka. It sounds like they came to do some serious things and they did it. We need to be able to say their names way more fluently. So we need them immortalized.
Definitely agreed. Anyone else have things to share? Okay, awesome. I think we can definitely move on to closing comments. If folks don't have anything else to share, I'll start. In short, Africans, Black people have a long, rich history. I'm just getting access to some of the things that is making me feel a lot more secure and faithful in the future of Black people. Because if it was done once, it can be done again. And we've reclaimed our, continents before, and we can do it again. So I really hope through all my learnings, I'll continue to become more and more codified and, independently do my best to bring justice to planet Earth. And I enjoy reading this book, but it's also very depressing. And after each reading, I find myself, a little bit drained, but I have new knowledge that's constructive.
Yeah.
Just to
For my closing comments, I just like to. I was skimming ahead and looking at some of the title names, and I imagine it's getting more a little bit more tragic from here. But I also am sure there will be many more powerful lessons we can learn, and there will be also, I'm sure, thousands of more of great examples of Black excellence and deep levels of Black self-respect that we will find in this book as we continue reading. But my biggest takeaway is night independent. Do not wait on yourself to be saved. Do all you can to save yourself.
to close off, as I'm reading this and will continue to read, all I'm thinking about is just really annotating the book. It is definitely a great read, and I learned a lot from this group, especially as I mentioned earlier, when it comes to like history and all these names, I just kind of go blank. So being intentional as I'm reading, just to understand what is being said here in the book, I think is very important for me. But yeah, I kind of look for it as well, and it's just it's just this keep rise and fall, rise and fall, rise and fall, rise and fall. That's going to continuously happen as we continue to read the book. And I think for me, it's just being able to like almost not connect the dots, but connect the dots and like critically think about these things, and take a second again to like understand, because obviously I'm not in that day and age. So it's one of those things of like seeing the European manipulations and applying it to this day and age, this modern day that we're in now. And just seeing like, obviously, as we've read, it's like Europeans haven't changed. So whether they started off wherever they started, it's just they always are going to be deceitful, manipulative, and power hungry. So I think it's important as I'm reading this to remember those characteristics of a European. in reference to the African civilizations or Black civilizations.
That was good. Good close. I mean, it triggered a thought from this last paragraph. I'm going to close with this. Shabaka, while actively cultivating the friendship of the Assyrian king Sargon II, was just as active in supporting the armies of the Syrians and the Palestinians. Modern, I guess he's saying modern day, what would be considered modern day Syrians and Palestinians. I say because it was exactly the same kind of commitment and special interest policy that the United States maintains in East Asia and other places around the world. Right up to today, you know, the same kind of manipulation, negotiation, power struggles, control are happening today as they were, and that's where they learned all that stuff from. Right? It's kind of to me, it's like I heard, it's kind of securing. I feel a little more secure knowing what happened and the possibilities of the future. So I think we can have a lot of influence, especially now with the gradual rise of some people, power of people, very incremental rise in the power of people of color.
Well said. Was that everyone? Was that everyone?
No. So for my closing comments, I would just like to say I'm really inspired, grateful, and I believe it's highly necessary for me to have a group that functions in this way, for allowing us to explore our thoughts, share our thoughts, and just collectively join in our thoughts of re-imaging our history, re-imaging the experiences that our ancestors had gone through, and just giving light and an image to their name and history. And I feel like I'm in same sentiments with Trajan, with Cert, and the mentality of it being draining, but that's only because of the work that we have to do around it, I believe. And I welcome that work, but because I understand that it's a guidance, it's a guiding work, and it's going to be a joy to fill myself up with that, because the more I fill up myself with this information, the more I feel like I walk with I walk more filled up. I don't feel hollow. I can never be, it allows me to never feel that doubt or imposter syndrome, or that's what I'm going to use it for anyway. I'm going to kill that imposter syndrome, kill that doubt, kill that lower inferiority that white supremacy, the system and spell at work will try and force you to believe, or make you believe in any kind of circumstances that you're put in a predominant space of more than 2 or 3 Europeans in any work environment. This information is the content or the buffers that I need for it not to reach me. They can't penetrate me because I'm armed with this information. I'm armed with these tactics. Yeah, so I'm grateful, and I look forward to reading further.
Thanks, everyone.